All right, well, welcome, Mark. It's good to have you all here. I'm looking forward to your presentation. I have to say we were a little bit intimidated after hearing some chants or something. I don't know what all that but I'm sure it's all for the good. So, my name's Alex Constantelos. I'm a high school teacher from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'll let my co-judges introduce themselves, and then you'll do the same.
My name is Lindsay Draper, retired from the juvenile court bench in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, currently one of the vice presidents of the Institute for Wellbeing in Law.
My name is Yvonne Werman. I'm a law professor at Arizona State University, so I don't know what rain feels like, but I can also take a lot.
Good morning, judges. We are Unit 2 from Grant High School in Portland, Oregon. I'm Violet Muller.
I'm Benicio Lambrez.
I'm Veronica Bianco.
I'm Beck McLaughlin.
I'm David Eaton. This is our teacher, Ms. Dee Pasquale. We're very happy to be here.
Wonderful. So you're probably wondering what question we have for you. It's number 3. John Adams observed that unicameral legislatures were subject to fits of humor, starts of passion, flights of enthusiasm, partialities of prejudice, and consequently productive of hasty results and absurd judgments. What examples from the Revolutionary period would have led Adams to such a conclusion? Does it follow that bicameralism was the solution as the founders were designing constitutions in the founding era? To what extent, if any, has bicameralism functioned the way founders intended?
Why did John Adams think unicameral legislatures were dangerous? In his April 1776 Thoughts on Government, Adams explained that unicameral legislatures would grow ambitious and after a time will not hesitate to vote in self-perpetual. He cited examples from England's Long Parliament and Holland's unitary government, both of which had extended their own terms as they neared re-election. Terms for Holland's unitary legislature ultimately grew from just 1 year to lifetime unelected terms. Additionally, Adams witnessed unicameral assemblies in the colonies make hasty decisions that violated individual rights, like when the 1775 New York provincial legislature prohibited loyalists from voting or holding office.
John Adams believed that the best governments of the world have been mixed, and proposed a Senate made up of a few great, rich, wise men that would balance power between the legislative and the executive branches and protect against the consolidation of power. When it came time to write state constitutions, there was already a long history of bicameralism in the colonies. 11 out of 13 colonial governments had bicameral legislatures, and ultimately, 10 out of 13 state legislatures remained bicameral, with the exceptions of Rhode Island, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, though all of which eventually became bicameral.
Many founders saw bicameralism as one of several solutions to better represent societal classes, prevent against a consolidation of power, and allow the legislative houses to check each other. At the Philadelphia Convention, James Wilson said, "A single legislature naturally tends toward despotism." Governor Morris reasoned that a bicameral system would protect the working class from the aristocracy by separating the two classes and preventing the rich from dominating both houses. Equal state representation in the Senate was a result of the Connecticut Compromise and served as a solution to the debates over representation at the Constitutional Convention. It maintained the influence that small states had under the Articles while apportioning the House to represent the people more adequately.
Bicameralism hasn't functioned in all of the ways that the founders intended. The Senate has served as a check on the House by voting down bills and slowing down the legislature, but delay is a double-edged sword. Voters approve of the Senate when it blocks bills that go against their beliefs, and approve of the Senate when it blocks bills, or disapprove of the Senate when it blocks bills they like. The members of the Senate and the House were supposed to be distinct, but today the lines have blurred. The 17th Amendment made senators directly elected, the same process as representatives, and originally the Senate was supposed to represent aristocratic interests alone, but today the House does as well. The median net worth of senators and representatives is now over $1 million.
Political parties in the filibuster have significantly changed how bicameralism functions today. The Senate is less likely to check the House when the two share the same party affiliation. The filibuster has made the Senate more anti-democratic by allowing the minority party to block legislation. In 1787, the framers envisioned bicameralism as the perfect way to bring mixed government to the young nation. In 2023, we find that the vision has only been partially realized. Bicameralism has balanced power in the federal government and provided for slower, deliberative lawmaking processes, but political polarization has slowed it too much, effectively stalling progress in the legislature. Thank you for listening. We're ready for your questions.
Since John Adams wrote, we've had hundreds of years of experience with democracy in hundreds of different democracies around the world. And I wonder, thinking about examples outside the United States, is there evidence that either unicameralism or bicameralism is systematically more effective one than the other?
Well, for example, New Zealand has always had a unicameral legislature, and they actually rank number 8 worldwide in best running democracies, while the United States ranks 36th in democracies. And further, they actually rank number 2 on the Freedom Index, while the United States ranks 15.
Additionally, Finland, Sweden, and Norway all rank top 5 on the Freedom Index, and they are all unicameral legislatures.
However, it's worth noting that it's difficult to discern which system is actually better in the whole, because every country has different needs when it comes to a political system. For example, unicameralism tends to function better in smaller, homogeneous communities where it's easier to efficiently pass legislation. For example, this is a reason why unicameralism is more effective in Nebraska than it would be in a state like California, New York, or Texas.
Where under Nebraska's unicameral system, each bill can only contain one issue, and they require a 5-day deliberation period for the people to actually discuss the bill, though it only works in their small community and would likely not function in a larger state or at the national level.
However, I don't think this population size of a country or state actually determines whether it should have a unicameral or bicameral legislature. For example, Finland has a unicameral legislature, but so does China, and they obviously have very different size populations. So it depends for each country.
Let me just kind of ask, given that last point, when I think of Finland, Sweden, Nebraska, I think of the same person. Whereas, with all seriousness, I think it might work with a homogeneous population. And as bad as I'm gonna feel as soon as I say what I'm about to say, when I think of China, I think of the same thing. Doesn't that imply that bicameralism is critical for a large multicultural group, whereas unicameralism might work if folks might have the same ideas?
Well, it's likely that there's also just a correlation in that, because the United Kingdom is largely unicameral due to the fact that the House of Lords largely has zero power, and the UK is also becoming more diverse as they're increasing immigration, and they have not really seen issues with not having a second house. And the two houses don't necessarily have to represent different sections of the population.
But also, I do agree with you. I think bicameralism serves the United States as a really important check against the majority, because there's a chance for people's parties to be represented on 2 levels rather than just 1. And people have more representatives in the bicameral system, which is especially important in a country with 300 million citizens.
Thank you.
So, you didn't get to unpack this point about political polarization has undermined bicameralism. I think political polarization has been great for bicameralism. When you have Democrats in charge of one house and Republicans in charge of another house, it suggests the country's divided, people have different ideas, stuff slows down, legislation is harder to pass. And when there's a huge groundswell of support and one party occupies both the White House and both branches of the government, they finally do things, like whether it's the New Deal or the Affordable Care Act or Reconstruction, radical Republicans in Reconstruction. Hasn't political polarization been great for bicameralism?
In a sense, yes. However, the issue today is not that we just disagree with each other. It's actually that we have unfavorable views of each other. According to a study by the Pew Research Center, the amount of Republicans who have unfavorable views of Democrats, the amount of Democrats that have unfavorable views of Republicans has nearly doubled over the past 20 years. And so while disagreement that leads to compromise is important and necessary in a bicameral system, currently there's too much disdain and dislike for it to function effectively.
And this dislike isn't new. For example, in 1942, the Senate blocked an anti-poll taxing bill, which would have protected black voters and given them more accessibility. And they only blocked it due to the fact that there were Southern white senators who were trying to block all civil rights bills.
And due to the 17th Amendment making the Senate more similar to the House because it's now elected by popular vote, the Senate doesn't act as a aristocratic body, as a separate body as the founders intended. It's more so just another two versions of the House. And due to political polarization, the Senate isn't, when it's between laws, it's usually due to political polarization due to different party lines, but they aren't between laws due to their wisdom as an upper house.
The founders didn't want it to be that when the houses are controlled by different parties, nothing gets passed, and when they're controlled by the same party, a lot of things get passed. They wanted them to have distinct different interests, independent of the party, and that would necessitate compromise.
Well, I'm gonna follow right from that. So, in a situation when the same party controls both houses of the legislature, is the bicameralism doing anything at all in that situation, or is it simply pointless?
Well, the Senate and the House do have different powers as enumerated in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1 states that all revenue bills must originate in the House in order to be more representative of the people, since taxation is representative.
The filibuster, the existence of the filibuster in the Senate, allows for a minority, or the minority party, to require a larger than 50% majority in order to pass legislation, which in one way will protect that minority party from the party holding both houses passing through whatever they want, though the filibuster does not exist in the House, making it so that the Senate.
The filibuster today is effectively used as a tool to stop progress rather than actually protect the minority party.
Sure, so what about at the state level? Because in a lot of states, there's a lot more symmetry between the two branches. Then, is bicameralism doing anything? If they have the same party controlling both?
I think there is still value to having two sets of eyes on a piece of legislation, even if the houses are controlled by the same party. Because when you're passing legislation that affects millions of people, I think it's beneficial for a larger team of experts to take a look at it before it goes into law.
For example, Nebraska's unicameral legislature, which is the only unicameral legislature in the United States, they are seen as one of the most efficient legislatures in the United States. However, efficiency is a double-edged sword because if you are passing laws quickly, you can also repeal them just as quickly.
For example, in 2015, the Nebraska legislature banned the death penalty and reversed the decision just 1 year later.
I think that bicameralism is less effective on the state level because of the Supreme Court case Reynolds v. Sims. States cannot do equal representation in the upper house. It all has to be proportional.
However, the existence of 6-year terms in the Senate versus 2-year terms in the House allows for senators to take on longer-term issues compared to House members because they don't have to worry as much about re-election for most of their terms.
You've kind of emphasized Nebraska. I mean, my understanding is Nebraska is pretty much at a standstill right now, and you've got one legislator who's pulling that off.
Yeah, well, this is another one of the issues with unicameralism, right? In a bicameral system, if the Senate's filibustering, as they so often do, the House can still continue to pass legislation. However, in Nebraska, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh has vowed to filibuster every single bill that comes to the House floor because of an anti-trans bill that was passed earlier in the session. And this is exposing one of the biggest faults with unicameralism. Actually, just a few weeks ago, a senator in the Nebraska legislature proposed an amendment that would change the system from unicameral to bicameral.
However, you don't necessarily need to change to a bicameral legislature to fix the issue of the filibuster. I think you need to change the rules of how the filibuster works, such as you have to speak the entire time, you can't silent filibuster, rather than changing to a bicameral system.
Thank you. Unit 2. It's fantastic. You make it look effortless, but as a We the People coach, I know the blood, sweat, and tears that go into producing what this looks like, and I just respect the heck out of it. Some specific points. I love that you recognize that John Adams was writing in 1776, and you made sure to give examples that were prior to just Pennsylvania and Georgia. A lot of teams were just skipping right ahead, but you talked about the long parliament and the Dutch experience. I love the detail of legislative procedure, not even just at the national level, but at the state level. If I were to give, I guess, a piece of constructive feedback, I would say that, thinking even more about how, if bicameralism is supposed to represent minority interests, if you were really committed to creating a second house to do that, would it look anything like the U.S. Senate? Right, considering that house over-represents small white rural states at the expense of larger, more diverse ones. And I think I would dig into that a little bit more. Like, if we want bicameralism to serve this goal, what does that bicameralism have to look like in practice? That would be a suggestion for improvement. But overall, I was really it speaks for itself. It does.
I enjoyed the performance very much as well. Let me just say 3 pieces of constructive criticism, just for improvement, because there's always room for improvement. I love the points about the 17th Amendment and Reynolds against Sims. I tend to think the 17th Amendment, I don't know, wasn't necessarily the best thing for American federalism. I don't know that it was the worst thing. And I tend to think Reynolds v. Sims was wrong. And that makes me a very unpopular law professor. Okay? You're saying you don't believe in one person, one vote? And so just unpack that, give counter arguments. Why did we get the 17th Amendment? Part of our Constitution, one person, one vote was kind of added to it, right? Unless your view of equal protection clause, but whatever. And so why did so many people, corruption in the state legislatures, are there benefits to the 17th Amendment? Are there benefits to one person, one vote? Are there problems with, some of these legislatures, especially in the South, had not, okay, that's for us, in 40 years, right? So that's one thing. Number 2, you clearly anticipated some questions. Like, you know the kind of standard questions you would get. I didn't feel that in response to mine about political polarization and bicameralism, like the first 3 or so answers, you guys talked about what you were planning or expecting or anticipating to talk about, disability, which is all a good point. I think Beck finally kind of directly answered the question, right? And so that was noticeable to me, but obviously these are nits. The whole, when you flubbed, kind of run out of things. It's okay to say in court, Your Honor, let me get back to that, let me think about that. And it's okay to say that, it's okay to get flustered, it's fine. Don't sweat it and, handle it fine. So that's all I want to say overall, very good job, and I'm sorry, Judge Draper, for not giving you any time to say it.
I always have to behave when I come to the Oregon team, because anybody who's been around me knows that the goddaughter that I visited in Tualatin, who now, by the way, has a place in Beaverton, has made me feel a certain kinship to the teams from Oregon. I have to be careful. And I deliberately didn't tell anybody about that before we started. So, having said that, I can't tell you how happy you made me. Oh dear, I just got told I don't have any more time to talk to y'all. You did a wonderful job with bouncing back on the Nebraska, showing me, no, I do know the current event and I know the details. Excellent job with that, and that was what I wanted to see. Thank you so much, you are wonderful.